بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم إلى يوم الدين. You saw this table. Inshallah, today we'll go through Juz, the 27. And Juz 27 has Surah Adh-Dhariyat, Al-Tur, Al-Najm, Al-Qamar, Al-Rahman, Al-Waqi'ah, and Al-Hadid. 7 surahs. And so the first ayah I picked in that Juz is this one. It's an interesting, this one ayah basically in one line. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to it to the natural world. And subhanallah, within this one, in order to really dig deeper into it. And this is what I said, the Quran has ayat that is so obvious to everybody, which are related to the Aqidah and the Sharia. You people read it, whoever, understand them. But there's a lot of ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about the creations. And the creation intended, because through reading the Quran, you know Allah from abstract concept. But by knowing His creation, you know Allah really from practical things. And I give this example so many times, like if I came today and told you this such and such is the greatest architect in the West, and you believe me, you accept the name. But if I take you and show some of his building that he built, that image will change. It becoming more concrete in your brain and in your heart too. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned so many things of His creation, and they put hints in it that a scientist can spend his lifetime studying it. And the person and this is the miracle of the Quran, that linguistically, you read the ayah and it doesn't confuse any person who is just, barely know how to read and write. But another person will take this ayah and spend the time, studying it in detail because it's related to creation. So if you look at these verses, it talk actually about a profound concept of astronomy, of geology, and in biology. Just one, basically few words in it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. I mean, this is now astronomy now. Hey, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about, the expansion of the universe. Now, and the second one, وَالْأَرْضَ فَرَشْنَاهَا فَنِعْمَ الْمَاهِدُونَ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about how Allah make the earth inhabitable for people. So that talks about geology now. وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ. And from everything we created pairs so that you may reflect. And now we're talking about biology now. Actually, talking about biology, we're talking about physics, about a lot of other subjects just in this few words here. Frankly, the reason I picked this ayah, because particularly the first one, particularly for younger guys, because a lot of time people get so impressed by this great scientist that who is an atheist, and people say, if he is an atheist, who you are, who are you, to protect, So the question is, when you read something, even something as consensus available from scientists, you really have to be careful. Particularly if you come to it and say, it contradicted the Quran, or even if you say it matches the Quran. Because now, if you said it's matched the Quran and then the science changed, you come and say it's contradict the Quran. So people have to be very careful, but it drives you to study more. So this ayah, وَالسَّمَاءُ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. This ayah, because in up to like the 1920, it was a consensus of the whole scientist community that the universe is stationary. It doesn't expand. It's settled now. And even in 1917, Einstein, when he came to have this formulate, basically his equation for the general relativity, he drove the equation for the universe. And then he found out the universe is expanding in his equation. But all of the consensus was stationary. How he then he cannot provide, he cannot come and claim it when everybody else is stationary. So what he did, he introduced in his equation a cosmological constant that forced the equation to show that the universe is stationary. Now, here is Einstein. We are not talking about a normal, scientist, but came in 1924. That tell you that even young people can challenge, the greatest scientist. So a young mathematician, actually Russian, Alexander Friedman, he came in and looked at this equation and said, no, the equation of Einstein show that the universe is expanding. Why he put this artificial constant that come from nowhere? And then obviously, and then come back in the 29, Hubble actually came proved that yes, the universe actually continue to expand. Which is scientifically you come and say, well, expanded to where? What is beyond the universe that we have? We're talking about a universe that the radius of that universe is almost 50 billion, light year. The light travel, 50 billion years to arrive to, and where it goes beyond it. And that's what, as a person who interested in, basically astronomy, so astrophysics, he will spend his time, trying to figure out these things. But subhanAllah, one verse, if there was a Muslim scientist who would have come and said, wait a minute, there must be something here fishy in Einstein, and he would have taken his name, would have been recorded in history. That doesn't mean that the Muslim at that 1924, there wasn't a great mathematician do exist. But the whole point is that, just to be careful. Every scientist can make mistakes. Also, even the consensus can make so blind acceptance and blind rejection should be in as a Muslim in this regard. Then Allah comes, وَالْأَرْضَ فَرَشْنَاهَا وَالْأَرْضَ فَرَشْنَاهَا فَنِعْمَ الْمَاهِدُونَ. If you think about it, out of this earth was all rocks. Because we know, at least even there is a hadith about it, that the earth came out from basically a volcano coming from under in the water. And when a volcano comes, it comes with basically frozen soil or frozen rocks that became rocks. But Allah subhanahu made it this way. Put in it river, put a storage facilities and so on. As we said, subhanallah, Allah subhanahu, there is nothing come to earth to support all of the creation that exists on earth come from outside the earth except the sun, the sunlight basically. Then the other one, وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا زَوْجَيْنِ. That's the duality now. Everything is pairs. And we look at it, and yes, from the, a biological point of view to subatomic, everything exists to what? A positive and negative charge, And the atom, even, if you look to the DNA is a double helix, and so on. So everything coming here. Now, do you really have to do this? But if you are a student of science, you should be able to do this. And that, what Tamim said, subhanallah, all of this, Allah creation. If you do this, then whom do you go to? فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. Go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is what you want to go from all of the problem that happened. The one who created all with this majesty, with this wisdom and with this power, whom do you go to other than him? Whom do you worship other than him? In this regard. The second one I picked is a verse which basically about the purpose of our existence. Obviously, that's a question that everybody's, why we are here? What's the purpose here? What do? We get born and live, 80 years or whatever age and then die. There must be a bigger purpose than this one. And then Allah subhanahu give us this clear and unambiguous reason for our existence. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ مَا أُرِيدُ مِنْهُمْ مِنْ رِزْقٍ وَمَا أُرِيدُ أَنْ يُطْعِمُونَ. So here is the trouble with it. When you look at translation, we said, okay, I have not created the jinn and the mankind except to worship me. So and it's very difficult to translate لِيَعْبُدُونَ to be worshipped, because ibadah comes actually coming from abd. Abd is a slave. So I have not created jinn and ins except to be slaves for me, Now, and that is the way that the term, because in a slavery, if you are a slave of somebody, You obey 100%. There's no ways you are going to, to basically change your mind in this regard. And this, and this relationship, okay, you worship Allah, if there is a return for it, and Allah subhanahu give you a return. Tell you first what worship, what ibadah means, and then tell you the reward you are going to get for doing this. Therefore, Allah subhanahu comes, and this doesn't exist in the Juz, but Surah At-Tawbah, how you become a abd, somebody by him. Okay? How you become abd to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You sell yourself to him. That's how you commit yourself. Allah subhanahu, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُم. Because it's an interesting, this is, Allah, who did we create ourselves? No, Allah created us, so He owns us. Did we create our wills? No, Allah created the wills, created the opportunity for us to make it, and created our ability to make it, and created the opportunity for us to make it. So everything comes from Allah. But even in this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I'll buy it back from you for a return to be in paradise for eternity. So the ibadah actually is that you sell yourself and your wealth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you committed yourself and your money for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's it. Now, if you are going to commit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, become abd, you have to fulfill your responsibility that He imposed on you on earth. And what is Allah created us for what? To be guardian over earth. So you have to fulfill the responsibility to be guardianship. How are you going to fulfill the responsibility of guardianship if you don't understand, all of how you do it? So suddenly that forces you directly, if Allah created for me resources in the earth, I better know how to extract these resources, how to take advantage of it, how to share it with other people, how to set the rules of justice. How are I going to set the rules of justice? How I can implement it? How I can ensure it does? And in order to do this, it requires knowledge. You have to have knowledge. An ignorant person is not going to be able to extract anything, is not going to take advantage of what Allah subhanahu have created. And that is why, by definition, if you are going to be a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to be a knowledgeable person to take advantage from all of the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have basically committed and made for you. Yes.
You must make it as a slave. The word slave.
Yeah, I try to do it, and I actually do it sometime, but because frankly, even if I put service, servant, because a servant coming from serve, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need any service from us. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does everything for us. But people have this negative connotation because a slave means committed to obedience. That's it. A servant is committed to serve, and Allah has no serve. Yeah. But the trouble with it, I 100% agree with you. Yes. Yes.
Who's man?
How could be Abdullah? Abdullah, it's the biggest honor that you be a true Abdullah. Anyway, the third ayah, and this tell you, if you are committed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't think that now your life is always going to be a comfortable life, an easy life. Because this life is not a life of receiving reward for your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, it's a life actually of being tested. It's arena for being tested. And remember when we talked for Al-Zukhruf, and we said what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that if the whole world was disbelievers, Allah subhanahu will have given them gold and silver and so on. But Allah subhanahu doesn't do it because there will be believers, and the believer is going to be subjected to testing, and that will confuse them that all of the wealth, all of the money will go to the disbeliever. So in that regard, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this life is not for the reward. The reward is eternal, in that regard. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do you do when you face some of these difficulties? When you feel lonely or if you're exhausted, when you feel this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wasbir li hukmi rabbik. Be patient with the Lord's decree. فإنك بأعيننا. And this is almost as intimate as it comes, you know. For you, you are in our eye. يعني I don't know in Arabic sometimes you said أنت في عيني يعني أنت خلاص يعني أنا I really hope you cannot do, you know, I'm so loving you to the point that it is, you know. So it is actually, you know, a very intimate expression just فإنك بأعيننا. فتخيل Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the universe, if you are really his true slave, then you are in his eye, an intimate relationship. If you are, you know, all the, can you imagine, would you fear anybody? Would you be concerned about anything after this? You know, وسبح, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فسبح بحمد ربك حين تقوم من الليل فسبحه وأدبار النجوم. Then you are basically, what you do in return of this, that you declare the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The word sabbih, we talked about it before, because, you know, there is sabbah, there is tasbih, and there is taqdees, and there is hamd. Why the hamd always comes with the tasbih, you know, but we talked about this before. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, we do this. So you are not forgotten. Yes, you might be facing some difficulty, but you are not forgotten. You are being protected, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, by him, by me, and your worth will be always elevated. But you have, don't overlook this, whatever hardship you have, and you get comfort in being basically glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and be consistent on this. Consistent, you know, حين تقوم, during the day and during at night, and even during the, you know, when the new light will be coming in this case. If you are a true slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a very righteous person, that does mean you are a perfect person. You are going to make mistakes. You are going to commit sins. What is important then, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you should avoid two things. Al-Kaba'ir, which is a major sin, and al-Fawahish. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض ليجزي الذين أساءوا بما عملوا ويجزي الذين أحسنوا بالحسنى. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so even here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about the muhsinin, those, you know, the people who are excel. Then, and who are they? Who are those people who are muhsinin, excel? الذين يجتنبون كبائر الإثم والفواحش إلا اللمم. That they are basically, you know, they avoid the major sin and the shameful deeds, you know, and then accept the minor things, you know, because nobody, I said, is never going to be perfect. If you look at this one, when you read this verse, the first question have to come in your mind: what are these كبائر الإثم والفواحش? That directly, when we talk about the double of Quran, when you hit something like this, then you have to search in the Quran to pick up what are these major sins and what are these fawahish. You know, from the Quran, you know, if the Prophet ﷺ added to them is fine, but don't go pick it from definition of somebody else before you search it yourself. And then when you look to this verses, I symbol for you these verses, was the major sins here and all of the verses that describe them. And you find out, and it's, you probably, if I tell you, say them, you will know them. You know, the shirk, neglecting the prayers, you know, murder, riba, exploitation, you know, consuming the wealth of the orphans, slander, betray, intoxication and gambling, despair from, you feel despair from the mercy of Allah subhanahu, and then disrespecting parent, you know, severing the relationship with your kin, false testimony, fleeing from the battle. That's why Muslims should never run away in a battle. They die or win, you know, except there is a criterion if you are going to go back to join others and so on. But that's, and then the shameful deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described it also, the zina, you know, the of homosexuality and speaking about Allah without knowledge. So these are the ones. And frankly, if you look at these things, you said, yeah, I mean, any person who have any decency should avoid all of these. a lot of time people feel, uncomfortable. And I found it actually, particularly for many people, when you tell them, okay, do tadabbur Quran, read the Quran, they feel uncomfortable with it. And I said, subhanallah, Allah subhanahu revealed the Quran in a language, which is Arabic language, that he knew that the majority of the people do not speak it. Within this case, he made it so difficult for them, you know. But then Allah subhanahu comes and give us this definition. He said, yeah, I made in the Quran, there are certain verses which are muhkamat, they concise, precise. In any language you translate it will be the same. And there is ayat which are, I put it in some form, in a form that requires specialty to study it. These ayat, you are not obligated to do it. But there is ayat which is necessary, like al-aqidah or sharia, iman billah, it must be obvious for you. Anybody can do it. And Allah subhanahu says, I made this Quran so simple. I made it. وَلِذَلِكَ this verse, that was repeated in Surah Al-Qamar, is repeated 4 times. And any time you look at the surah and see a verse repeated several times, just to concentrate and deeper in the meaning of that, why Allah repeated this so many times. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have certainly made this Quran easy, to understand. So is there anybody who doesn't want to remember? Anybody can't remember this? But in order to do this, when Allah subhanahu, is there any who will remember? He basically called it, how are you going to remember? How are you going to study the Quran if you're really sincere? If you're really doing tadabbur? And if you have a humility to know the limitation too, But if you're going arrogant about it, then you will never get message, basically proper information. And this is why Allah subhanahu always say, in order to understand the Quran, and Allah, subhanAllah, Allah make it from the first, almost like the prerequisite in the first ayah. In order to get guidance from this one, from this book, you have to start with taqwa. And taqwa is a humility, a sincerity, and the deep interest. Yes, I want to understand. And Allah subhanahu say, if you have this, I'll teach you. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمْكُمُ اللَّهُ. So the question really is not an issue of tadabbur. It's not because your brain is not intellect enough, doesn't have enough cognitive capacity. No, it's your attitude is not the right one. But if you are really sincere, Allah subhanahu will make you understand it. And if you get even confused, you will always find the means to correct that confusion or ask about it. But you always have, obviously, there is, as I said, there is ayat, which is everybody have to understand. There is ayat requires specialties. There is legal ayat. Maybe somebody who study law have to study it. There is science ayat. Somebody have science. Somebody astronomy, some biology, some mathematics. Computer science, you will find the ayat. Nobody understands it truly except somebody who study computer science. But how are you going to derive from it? It's a computer scientist will derive from this ayat and help him actually develop the civilization that make the Muslim nation the best nation, because it requires all of the things. Even we talked about defense industries. They're clearly in the Quran. How you develop how you develop weapon system. If people just read it, who are interested in that discipline, And subhanallah, this happened 1400 years. Allah subhanahu point to us about the systems that can use to basically subdue anybody, and we never develop it, and we suffering from it. Remember, I bought one time, a picture when we're talking about, Tyrone Ababil, and then drones. I picked just the picture, was a bird flying, a flock, and exactly the same picture. I said, subhanallah, I mean, it's in front of our eyes. Now this next one is one you probably mentioned it before. Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan, allamahu al-bayan. Now, I'm going to explain it one way. If you like it, it's fine. If you want to disagree, come with your own. It doesn't matter. There is no obligation for it. But if you agree with mine, okay, then in that case, don't come and say this brother Mamdouh said this. Quote yourself. If you agree, that's your opinion now. All what it is, I presented to you my opinion. And you know this. The verse, if any human being will write it, will write Ar-Rahman, خلق الإنسان, علم القرآن, علمه البيان. Because you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say Ar-Rahman, which Allah, and we talked about Ar-Rahman. علم القرآن, he taught the Quran, and he created man and taught a clear speech. Okay, if he created man, he taught him a clear speech. But how come, teaching the Quran came before creation of the man? How did it come? Because you can argue, you said, oh, well, maybe it doesn't matter really, the sequence is not, well, this is the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put it for, it's not a random, and it's up to you to think about it. So, in this case, then you ask yourself, and this is how it comes actually. If you read it, I said in Arabic and English, you probably will see, read it in English, here will be the same thing. Whom did Allah teach the Quran before he created man? You can say the angels, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about the man. This ayah is not for the angel, this is us for us. What Allah created before he created man? The nafs. Because didn't we all created from nafs wahida? In many ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Surah Al-Nisa, Al-An'am, Al-A'raf, and Zumar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nasu ittaqu rabbakum, alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahid. O people, O mankind, have taqwa of Allah who created you from a single nafs. And we generate salit nafs as a soul. Okay, a single soul. So we all came from a single soul. So the nafs has to exist before the man, because the nafs has to go in the body of Adam and everybody else in that regard. So in this regard, if Allah taught the Quran to the nafs, that means every human being have been taught the Quran by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How come we don't remember it? Because do we remember when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came for Surah Al-A'raf and told us at that time, even at the time of Adam, he make us testify about take that grand covenant with him that he is our Lord? Do we remember this? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us, when it came to the created everybody and said, Alastu barabbikum, qalu bala. Am I not your Lord? They said, yes, we are. You are. And then we bear witness that you are our Lord. And then the verse continues, lest you should say on the day of judgment, we were unaware of this. What if you were unaware? So the many things we don't remember. How then are we going to, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he taught you the Quran before even you were born, before Adam was created? But he taught what? He taught the nafs. That means if your nafs can be purified to the high level, you would remember what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have taught you. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says always, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. The successful one who purified his nafs. Because if you purify your nafs, you will basically draw from all of the teaching that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have taught you. This brings us now to another hadith that taught about people who remember, several hadiths talk about this, that they will come tell the people, the men of the Quran, read and ascend. And as far as you can recite in this world, that used to recite. He said, let me read it properly. Read and ascend as you used to recite in the world. Indeed, your rank is determined by the last verse you recite. Is that means that only if I remember the Quran here, memorize it, that will be the time I remember this? Even if I read it and memorize it, I never did anything with it and I'm a corrupt person? No. Here is we can connect it to the other one, and Allahu A'lam, but it means that if your nafs is so purified, the degree of purification of the nafs will be able to recite from the Quran that Allah have taught you. Because at that time, the only thing we'll be judging is the purity of the nafs. Remember that in the day of judgment, when we get dies, and what is going to, nafs will be married to a new body. So we'll have a nafs, something else, that a new body then. So the brain that you have today, it's not going to be the same. It will be something else. The nafs will embed in this. So in that regard, the purity of the nafs is the one which we all have to work on. So I'll leave this with you to, if you have a better explanation or disagree with me, that's fine too. There's nothing here.
If your body is purified, you are a different person. You're not the same as
your body have to change. The material of it have to change, because the end of the day, Allah have to marry your nafs to another body to live forever. There will not be digestive system. You are not going to do there's a lot of things we cannot do to live for eternity and so on. So then the seventh one I picked is this in Surah Al-Waqi'ah. And obviously, Surah Al-Waqi'ah, many people have so many verses, but I want to focus in this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about that inevitable event, which is, basically the day of judgment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in that day of judgment, all of the people will be divided only in three groups. Okay? And why I'm said only three groups, Allah subhanahu wa kuntum azwajan salasa. And linguistically, they said by means Allah subhanahu azwajan, if Allah subhanahu says wa kuntum salasata azwaj, is different than kuntum azwajan salas. Azwajan salasa becoming restricted to the number. Salasa to azwaj means it could be more than three. Okay? So there's only three, and then the whole surah discuss about three groups and what is these three groups will receive. The first one as-sabiqun, the foremost was sabiqun as-sabiqun, and then the second one is ashabul yamin, and the third one is ashab al-shimal. That's ashabul yamin ma ashabul yamin wa ashabul shimal ma ashabul shimal. It's in the verses now. So, but then Allah subhanahu, and every one of them, Allah subhanahu described in the surah what they are going to do. What is, al-sabiquna, what they are going to receive, what Ashab al-Yamin will receive, what is obviously the Ashab al-Shimal will receive. And you can read this, it's so clear in the surah. But the interesting part, Allah subhanahu come to this as sabiqun, and Allah subhanahu say, وَالسَّابِقُونَ السَّابِقُونَ ثُلَّةٌ مِنَ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَقَلِيلٌ مِنَ الْآخِرِينَ. That out of those, there is as-sabiqun, there is the majority is going to come from the early generations, and then few will come from the last one. But when it came to Ashab al-Yamin, he said that, basically, for both of them, for Ashab al-Yamin, Ashab al-Yamin, there is going to be a large number from them, and Sullatu min al-Awwalina wa Sullatu min al-Akhirin. That means there will be, from basically a large group from the first generation and large group from the last generation. So in order to become from this sabiqun to join with them, you really have to raise yourself a little higher. Inshallah, at least today we guarantee, alhamdulillah, inshallah, we'll all be guaranteed to at least be from Ashab al-Yamin, and Allah subhanahu protect us from being even coming closer to those Ashab al-Shimal. So we'll have, huh? Inshallah. Is an interesting, actually, yeah. Al-Firdaus al-A'la, you're right. But is one of these, I wonder, here is a brother who's saying that we should be all from the Sabiqin, which is great, But somebody said, wait a minute, you want to be ahead of me, honey? What is this? You are going to be one of the few, and then we all have to be in the second level. So when you make the dua, make it for yourself, But alhamdulillah, inshallah, may Allah subhanahu make us all. I mean, obviously the number, who knows? Yes. Now, we talked about the responsibility as guardian on earth. These are the verses, by the way. But what is the role of the prophets? The roles of the prophets was to come to do, basically, deliver the message of Allah and establish justice in the world. That is the role of the messengers, And as an inheritance of the message, our role is to do the same thing. to deliver the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and establish justice in the earth. Now, but can you establish justice on the earth or even deliver the message if you are weak, if you are ignorant? Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasize this, when I send a book and send a way to judge the balance, I have to also send for you that means the tools or the things that will give you enough power to be able to deliver without anybody preventing you, and to also to establish justice. Because knowing that this is something just and delivering the justice and establishing completely different things. So in this ayah of Surah Al-Hadid, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent three things: the book, Al-Mizan, and then Al-Hadid. Ayah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعْهُمْ, He sent, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent our messenger with clear proofs. وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعْهُمْ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانِ. We send them with them the book, which to provide the guidance, and then the balance to establish justice. Why? لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Then وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ. الْحَدِيدَ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send the iron. So the iron, and that is if Muslim nation are basically backward in industry, because they tell you the iron and the steel, it is the basic industry. If any Muslim nation does not have this advance in this industry, they have nothing. They basically, abandoned something that Allah sent to them, as much as you abandon the book or abandon the Mizan. Unfortunately, Muslim nation abandoned the three. Because they abandoned the Mizan, most of the countries, Muslim countries, you cannot have justice in them, unless you have a bigger connections. And then obviously weak, they abandoned the iron and the means of industrial development. And therefore the book has become reading the book and kissing it and putting it in the shelf, but no application of it. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and says, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is another ayah we talked about, وَإِن تَنْصُرُوا اللَّهَ يَنْصُرْكُمْ. If you give support to Allah, Allah will give you support. So we said at that time, how are you going to give support to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah owns everything and controls everything. Here is the ayah that explains it. So if Allah send all of this, وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَنْصُرُهُ وَرُسُلَهُ بِالْغَيْبِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَوِيٌّ عَزِيزٌ. That means the way you do give support to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to basically fulfill the role of the messengers by delivering the message and basically having established justice in the world in this regard. And obviously you can take at this and look at the Surah Al-Hadid, subhanallah, it really, sometime if, believe me, we said about this one. Can you imagine if this is people who are studying engineering and so on, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell them, I send the iron, and the iron has in it that give you might, and would you think you wouldn't want to be advanced in iron and steel technology? Wouldn't that be a basic request from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell you, you have to do this. This is how you can purify the iron, how you make steel, how you do this, how you build, facilities to, subhanallah. But we take it and we pass by, really.
The way I look at this part of the Hadid, the iron, is metaphorically speaking, it's saying, take the iron 1400 years ago and become an expert in it. But if you were to take it to its logical end, it means, and then after iron, understand this and go after this. After that, go after this. And industry after industry after industry, ultimately what he's saying is that keep ahead of the curve all the time as you get more and more and more and more. It's not just restricted to iron. Iron is a starting point, really.
You're exactly right, because they've always said that iron and steel is the basic industry for any industrial development. You don't make anything. You don't make cars. You don't make, tools. You don't make anything, except when you have this type of industry. The rest of it comes later, in them. And frankly, when you do it, because you learn a lot of things. In fact, if you study engineering and material science, one of the basic courses is iron and steel, and how you make it, how you purify it, and so on. But important thing is also, remember this. Now, you can have, unfortunately, we as Muslim missed the ayah, and therefore we cannot develop the justice. The other people got the iron, but now they oppress other people. You have to have the three. You have to have the guidance, commitment for justice, and then you have the power to support it. If you don't have it, what is this? You do.
The Mizan is one of the
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
One has to
Sure.
truly think and reflect.
But now, in order to develop these things, iron and industry and so on, how are you going to develop it if you are poor, if you don't have money? Then you comes in. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes in financial sacrifice. You have to put your money, you have to invest in these things. It's not only services that you create money with. No, you have to spend. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَآمِنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَأَنفِقُوا مِمَّا جَعَلْنَاكُمْ مُسْتَخْلَفِينَ فِيهِ. The money I have given to you, you are a trustee of it. You don't own it. فَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَأَنْفَقُوا لَهُمْ أَجْرٌ, and who believe and spend it and have a great reward. And the reason why, because you need the strength to require financial sacrifices. And we said this, remember, in the past, it was actually, the government didn't have taxes. The Prophet ﷺ didn't institute taxes, but it was mainly, it's from charity. When you want to develop arms, you want to buy something, it's always a charitable contribution. And that's why it's charitable, because it is money of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You spend it for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes also when you can spend the money, when the country is still advancing, weak, and is trying to build, or you spend the money is when the country already strong. Are they equal? The person who is willing to spend the money when the country is still weak would be equal to the one who spend the money when now everything is, now you advance it and the leader comes in and said, we need money, you're going to give it to him. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes and says, yes, لا يستوي منكم من أنفق من قبل الفتح وقاتل أولئك أعظم درجة من الذين أنفقوا من بعد وقاتلوا وكلا وعد الله الحسنى. That yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those people who basically spend from their money before victory comes in, before al-Fath. I mean, in general, tie this ayah to Fath Makkah, but really the ayah is broader than this one. We are now here in a weak position, so it can be the same thing. So the generality of the application, but it's still when the country is still trying to develop and you spend the money, that is much better position than a country after it is already advanced. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, وَكُلٍّ وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْحُسْنَى, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for both of them, Allah give a fine reward. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes in, as much as when we talk about in Allah اشترى من المؤمنين أنفسهم, that you have yourself, Allah created you and give you the money and Allah buy it from you. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also emphasize when it comes to charity. He said, yes, the money you are granted, you are trustee of it. But when you spend it, I am taking as a loan on me. I am going to pay you, compensate you for it far more. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed this, basically approach for it, because frankly, if we are really serious about knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would we really not keep giving a charity all the time? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, when you give a charity, it's loan to me, and I multiply it to you. If we really trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, really it comes at the end of the day. That's why you find money is a great test in the Quran. In many, and the shaitan use it. Shaitan know that if you can really believe that you are a trustee on the money on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah, whatever He tell you, spend it freely, the shaitan comes at, it's poverty, the kids, and so on. So it will always come this way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came here and named it in other verses too. من ذا الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا فيضاعفه له. Now, there is anyone who can lend Allah a good loan and He will multiply it for them? Not 10%, not 20%. Multiply.
I use the word so it's like separate.
As,
your money will be multiplied and you will be given.
Jazakallah khair. وَلَهُ أَجْرٌ كَرِيمٌ. Yeah, it's an addition things here. So, but now where is the money we'll spend? If you are now in a state of developing countries, instead of buying a mansion, you spend it in supporting research projects. How about, you basically to develop, it's like we do. Do we really do any research around here with all of the facility we have? Why shouldn't we have a research institute? Maybe not necessarily to, to discover, minerals and something, but how about medicine? Isn't that part of the technology and knowledge too? How come we don't even have one hospital, Islamic Muslim hospital, when we have so many doctors around, I mean, it's really sometimes amazing. We can always look at the Middle East, Pakistan or Egypt or whatever, Yemen or Sudan, and say, oh, those guys are corrupt. Or they don't do anything. How about us? How many people Muslim here in Houston? 300,000, almost 500,000. And they cannot even combine to do one great project. Subhanallah.
Do we have to limit the word earth to alone in financial terms?
No, it can be much broader in your effort and your knowledge and a lot of other things, But frankly, a lot of people, the money is always the most difficult one for people to do. You're willing to do. In fact, you're willing to sacrifice your life than your money, Yeah, that's right. And so because money is somehow, I said, because that's how the shaitan plays on it, actually. It's all about. Even when you have so much money, people actually still attach the money for the sake of the money, to it. And we all, frankly, have this feeling of miserlessness. So we really have to just, suppress ourselves in this case.
The reason I was raising the question is because if you're a poor person who wishes to give Allah a good loan, we can still give Allah a good loan.
Volunteer to anything. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Yeah. But even remember also, even if the poor person, because frankly, I always say the rich guy probably doesn't need to spend the money because he already have enough. But if you want Allah to multiply to you your money, then you need it when you are poor. Spend something. It doesn't have to be $100,000. It can be $10, $5. You can decide, I'm going to work 1 hour of my work, I'm going to spend it for a charity. And Allah subhanahu will open avenues for you. And I told you this example before.
Nobody is poor. Currency that is like me. Everybody, level playing field is time. Time is the currency.
But also there is opportunities. And frankly, we are blessed, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, frankly, with all honesty, if you look about it, how many people in the world will envy our position here? Coming to United States, one of the greatest countries in the world, the most powerful. And what bothers me was honestly, and I always tell the kids this, I said, you squandering the opportunity. Allah subhanahu put you here to go to the best school, learn from the best professors. And now you're trying to be a mediocre student, just an average student. Why? And that is something which really for younger kids, they have to be held accountable. And I'm sure Allah subhanahu will ask us, because we know the test, what did you do with your youth? How do you do this? You waste your time when Allah give you opportunities that billions of people in the other world wish to have it. So last ayah, and this is why everything can become theoretical if we treat it only as a brain, as our intellect, unless whereas our heart can be impacted with it. And this is why Allah subhanahu says, أَلَمْ يَأْنَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَمَا نَزَّلَ مِنَ الْحَقِّ وَلَا يَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِ فَطَالَ عَلَيْهِمْ من الأمد فقست قلوبهم وكثير منهم فاسقون. Here is the ayah. We all read it. Has the time not come for those who believe as us, that their heart should humble, takhsha, have this humble and awe at the remembrance of Allah and the truth that has been revealed. When we read this ayah, do we feel like our heart is shaking, for example? We read it, but what is the impact of this ayah on us? Is an interesting one. But subhanallah, because sometimes they also tell you your brain can get you on the door, but your heart opens the door. So your brain can get you to the doors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but that doesn't mean you're basically relating to Allah and hearing Him, except by your heart. And here is a case of a man who became, a great scholar and a great wali, min awliya Allah. And we don't have to go through who's a wali, but he was a great, scholar. And it's an interesting that this person was a highway robber or a thief. And, scared everybody from Khorasan. And he heard this. He was going climbing the wall, climbing in the wall to steal, to break into a house and do something bad. And what happened? Somebody was reciting this ayah. أَلَمْ يَأْنَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن تَخْشَعَ قُلُوبُهُمْ لِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. And he directly said, "Oh Allah, it's a time. Now, yes, I am this." Now, this person is Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad, and you read about him. As soon as he heard this ayah, which I'm sure he heard it many times and he do it, but at that time when his heart was open, he directly said, "That's it for me." He abandoned everything. But you see, the issue is it because sometimes, okay, how about all of the problem he has? He went and returned to everyone he stole something from him, whatever he has, if he still have it, and whoever didn't have, he asked for their forgiveness. Because he went then to Mecca and basically studied the Hadith and the Quran and became one of these great scholars. What influenced him? One ayah. That just at the time when her heart was open, it became, basically reacted to it. And after that, he became, if you read about him, he wrote a lot of things. So I'm just quoting a few things. He said, this is his statement. By Allah, it's not permissible for you to harm even a dog or a pig unjustly. How can you harm a fellow Muslim? How many Muslims are killed on the hand of Muslims? And if you kill a dog, people would say, "Oh, you kill a dog in inhumane, but kill a Muslim is easy, And then he come and say, the most untruthful person is the one who denies his own sins. The most ignorant is the arrogant one who counts his good deeds. And the most knowledgeable of Allah is the one who fears Him the most." A servant of Allah, here is Abdullah, a slave of Allah will never be complete until his faith, his deen, has authority over his desires. And he will never be destroyed until his desires have authority over his religion. So that's some of his writing. So here is one man, an example of one man, and this exists for everybody. In a defining moment, every heart can change, no matter how much you deviated, from Islam. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك اللهم لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت فإنك يا ربنا تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك. اللهم ادخلنا برحمتك في عبادك الصالحين. اللهم اخرجنا من ظلمات الجهل والوهم إلى نور العلم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. اللهم اكفنا بحلالك عن حرامك وبطاعتك عن معصيتك وبفضلك عمن سواك. اللهم بفضلك ورحمتك أعلي كلمة الحق والدين. اللهم انصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين يا أكرم الأكرمين. Oh Allah, spread your mercy upon us, shower us with your blessings, increase our knowledge, grant us forgiveness, and reward us with the company of the prophets in the Firdaus al-A'la. Oh Allah, purify our hearts, strengthen our faith, increase our knowledge, and make us benefit from what you have taught us. Oh Allah, forgive our parents and all our friends and relatives who have passed away. Oh Allah, make their graves guarded from heaven and grant them the Firdaus al-A'la. Oh Allah, we have many of our friends and relatives who are sick. Oh Allah, grant to all of them full and speedy recovery. Oh Allah, guide our children, protect them, and make them righteous. Oh Allah, grant us the power and the ability that we may be grateful for the favors you have bestowed upon us and our parent, and that we may do righteous deeds that are pleasing to you. Oh Allah, we seek from you all of the good, whether we know it or we don't. And we seek your refuge from all evil, whether we know it or we don't. Oh Allah, we seek refuge in you from incapacity, from laziness, from fear, from greed, from poverty, and from the torment of the grave. Oh Allah, we have many of our brethren who are living under oppression and injustice. Oh Allah, heal their trauma, protect their helpless, and grant them lasting peace and prosperities. Oh Allah, we ask with every name you have elected for yourself, that none of us leave this gathering, but his pains have been relieved, his worries have been removed, his debts have been paid, his weaknesses have been concealed, his sins have been forgiven, and his needs have been fulfilled. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.